I'm Charlie, and I'm a clinical psychologist who's worked with people with a wide range of functional neurological disorders in groups and individually, using a wide range of different therapies. And I've also worked with collaborators to publish a book about ways to manage living with functional seizures. So I thought it'd be useful to put this video together just to describe what we think might be driving functional neurological disorders, as well as therapeutic approaches that can help and resources that might be useful. So I hope it's helpful. So what do I mean when I say functional neurological disorders? Essentially, it's a condition where you have the symptoms that might be associated with a neurological condition, but there's no physical damage to the neurological parts, such as the brain, the nerves. So essentially, it's a software rather than a hardware problem, which is good because that means that therapeutic approaches can be helpful. So functional neurological disorders can manifest as seizures that could be in the form of drop attacks or shakes or blacking out. It could also manifest as limb weakness or paralysis, dissociation, kind of feeling zoned out, spaced out, disconnected from our surroundings. Potentially issues with speech, so perhaps slurred speech or difficulties with swallow, as well as other various symptoms that can manifest. Because they're not caused by structural issues, sometimes people can feel dismissed by medical professionals or worry that there's something else going on. So it can be really upsetting and scary to have a functional condition because there can be a lot of confusion and doubt, and it can often take quite a long time to reach a diagnosis or a decision about what's happening. So if we think about what might be psychologically stressful for someone who experiences a functional neurological disorder, they might be experiencing all these physical symptoms, so pain, numbness, tiredness, weakness, fatigue. And that can also impact on their ability to do stuff. So they might be less active, less able to go out, which might impact on their mood. They might feel more low. And as they feel more low, they might be less likely to go out. And that feeds back into feeling low. So there can be vicious cycles that develop. There might also be thoughts around people not believing me. Am I losing my mind? Is this cancer? Is it some other condition that they've just not picked up, which can contribute to anxiety? Or even thoughts around, can I trust my body if it's not telling me the truth about what's going on? And that can add to that anxiety, that fear. Often people can find that when they seek help, they are dismissed because there's no clear medical cause, and that can contribute to that sense of confusion and worry. One of the models that sometimes people find helpful to explain functional neurological disorders is this idea that we're a bit like a pot that's boiling up on a stove. So stressful life events add to the heat that's going into the pot, and gradually it warms up. It can take so much heat, but eventually, when there's too much heat for it to contain, it boils over. And that could be in the form of an FND attack. So that could be a seizure, it could be a paralysis event, it could be slurred speech, something else. Every situation is different. So there's no hard and fast rules about what contributes to someone developing a functional neurological disorder. But some risk factors can include traumatic events. So that could be a one-event trauma, like a road traffic accident. It might be more complex trauma, so childhood events that happened over a longer period of time, or other adverse childhood experiences. Sometimes people have an accident or a fall, and it seems that their functional difficulties develop after that. Another model that can be really helpful to explain what's happening with functional conditions is the polyvagal model. So Stephen Porges and Deb Dana have been big proponents of this model. And essentially there's three main states that we can exist in. So you've got the ventral state down here. That's more regulated. So ventral just means front. So the bits of the vagal nerve that come out at the front include your hands, your face. And so when we're engaging socially, that's quite regulating. And there's other things that can keep that system engaged. And often we're just kind of cruising, surfing in between the ventral state and the sympathetic state. Sympathetic state sounds nice, doesn't it? But actually, the sympathetic response is the fight or flight response. So if our threat detection system, which is always scanning to check, are we safe, are we unsafe, decides I'm not safe, it kicks in a bit of an adrenaline rush and we get ready to fight or run. That's really useful in certain situations, like if we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, for example, but it's not so good for longer-term stress events like having large amounts of debt or being under stressful conditions in childhood, for example. And so if we have a longer-term stress, what can happen is our decision system that comes from the threat system switches from I can do something about this, which is the sympathetic zone, to going into the I can't do anything about this, and goes into the dorsal, the shutdown zone. And this might be where the functional symptoms are at their most intense. So if you think about if you've ever seen a mouse being chased by a cat, initially it runs and it's in fight or flight mode, it's in sympathetic mode. But eventually it might reach the point where it decides, I can't do anything about this. It's not a conscious decision, but at that point it will just keel over and it will appear to be dead. And that's a really useful survival system. It's an older survival system, so it doesn't kick in as quickly, but it's designed to keep the animal safe by making the predator lose interest. And so when we're in that shutdown mode, it can feel really weird, really kind of disconnected, spaced out. And that is what some people describe when they're experiencing their functional neurological symptoms. So for some people, that polyvagal model offers a bit of a kind of framework that helps them to make sense of what they're experiencing. And a resource that can be really helpful if you want to explore that further is Deb Dana's polyvagal cards. So check those out if you're interested. If you think that you might have a functional neurological condition, but you're not sure, it's always worth getting it reviewed by your GP or a specialist neurologist just to rule out other reasons why you might be experiencing those symptoms. So, from a therapy point of view, what can help when people are experiencing functional symptoms? I tend to use a combination of EMDR and acceptance and commitment therapy. So I've done other videos on EMDR, but if I describe how it might relate to someone who's experiencing a functional neurological disorder. So essentially with EMDR, what we're looking to do is process historic events that have contributed to symptoms in the present day and then make a template for the future that is helpful. So if we think about the past events, it could be a car accident, it might be a fall, it might be childhood events that were traumatic. So we put them in the past column of the plan. And then in the present, we think about triggers that are happening in the here and now. So what might set the FND off? And we could process those as well. And any symptoms, so again, just thinking about whether we need to process the context that those symptoms might develop in. And then in the future, thinking about, okay, what's a good template for things are coming up, things that might have been stressful in the past, but I'm handling it, I've got this. And then we'd install that with some processing. And a really key thing to get in place before we start doing the processing is these resources. So we think about things that can help you to feel grounded, to feel safe, to feel regulated, and we'd spend as long as we needed building that up to make sure that you felt safe to do the processing, but also to provide a foundation for day-to-day life. And then thinking about acceptance and commitment therapy. So there's three main aspects to it. So there's being present, opening up, and doing what matters. And a key thing that can be quite helpful from acceptance and commitment therapy when applied to functional neurological conditions is the idea of the struggle switch. So sometimes when the functional symptoms kick in, for example, if someone's feeling physically weak or that paralysis, understandably, they might start to struggle against it, to kind of go, no, I can do this, to really fight it. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it has the opposite effect. So we use the kind of metaphor of being stuck in quicksand. Sometimes if you're in quicksand, you start to struggle But all that does is make it worse. It makes you kind of sink into it. And the last thing you want to do when you're in quicksand is stop moving. But sometimes that's the best thing to do. So we'd look at ways to stop struggling and drop the struggle and see if that helps. It might take a while to feel safe to be able to try that out, but it can be transformative. The opening up part is opening up to the discomfort that can come with moving towards the things that matter. So if we think about this in terms of the matrix, I use the matrix a lot. Essentially, with the matrix, you've got this horizontal line, and going that way is moving towards what's important to you. Going that way is getting pulled away from what matters to you. And then anything below that horizontal line is on the inside. No one else can see these things. And anything above is on the outside, so people can see those things. So with the matrix, we would usually start at the bottom right, thinking who and what are important to you. These are your values. Then what comes up on the inside that might pull you away from those values? It could be thoughts, it could be physical sensations. And how can you unhook from those thoughts and physical sensations? And then up here, what are you doing to avoid these things that perhaps feels like it helps, but it doesn't fix the problem? So how can we reduce that avoidance? And then over here, what can you commit to doing to make things improve? So what's going to help you to feel better? And then in the middle is the noticing. So opening up, doing what matters, and being present. And that matrix can provide a nice framework for doing that. I thought it might be helpful just to mention some resources that can be really useful for people who are experiencing functional symptoms. So a fantastic website is neurosymptoms.org, and that's put together by a consultant, John Stone. And it's got tons of resources, references to books, to apps. It's got its own app. It's a great starting point. Lots of videos as well on there. Some books that I'd recommend. So A View from the Floor by Kate Berger, and her therapist, Lorna Myers, PhD, wrote Psychogenic Non-Epileptic Seizures, a guide, which some people find really helpful. If you're more of a video watching person, then I'd recommend the documentary Dissociated by Clea Catalina. It features Marcus Ruber, who's a specialist in non-epileptic seizures and functional conditions based in Sheffield in the UK. And it has lots of lived experiences from people who've had functional conditions. If you like using comics or graphic novels, there's a really great graphic novel called Not There by Gavin Inglis. I'd recommend accessing that. It's free to access as far as I'm aware. And if you like using apps, then the Neurosymptoms FND guide might be really useful, and that's for all functional neurological conditions. There's also My FND. Both of those are available on the app stores. I'd also recommend the app Smiling Mind, which is a free app that has lots of mindfulness exercises. So thinking about that being present part of the ACT approach, it can help you to build up that ability to be present. So thanks for watching. I hope that those resources, that information was useful. If you have anything that you'd like to share in terms of other resources that might be helpful, or strategies, or just any information or any questions, please put them in the comments. I've put some links to other videos that might be helpful here. And if you want to hear more from me, then please like and subscribe. Thanks very much for watching.